Nice to see you all. Raise your hand if you were here last time, if this is your second Zoom and Knit. Awesome. I see some hands. Welcome back. If this is your first Zoom and Knit for our knit along, welcome as well. We're glad to have you. All right. Let's see. We're about a third of the way to the people who signed up, so we'll let a couple more people get in. Awesome. All right. And let me see. And just a reminder, we are recording this meeting. I'm sure you guys saw all the notifications. So I know there are a lot of people who can't make it, who do want to watch it. If you don't want to be in the recording, you can always turn off your video and turn off your sound and not volunteer to share anything, but we are going to be recording. All right, I'm going to go ahead and so if my co-hosts could also spotlight themselves, so I'm not the only one. Okay.
Here we go.
Oh,
did I do it?
I'm not sure. You want to do add spotlight instead of replace spotlight. There we go. Okay.
That's what I did. There we go. Thank you.
All right. So welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to our Zoom and Knit. This is our second Zoom and Knit for the Lightweight Raglan Pullover. My name is Juliana. I'm the social media and outreach coordinator at Purl Soho. I'm joined today by my co-host, Jaja, who's our customer service manager. We also have Jess, Gianna, Lily, and Margaret from our customer service team here to help moderate the chat and answer any questions you might have.
Yep. And as Juliana said, this is our second one. If you weren't here before, the last time we went over different yarn choices, aside from the ones that we recommended, gauge, fit. We talked about how to find your size and even the cording stitch. So we covered a lot, and we're going to cover some of them again, but go more into detail about the beginning of the sleeve.
Yeah, we know there are people at all different stages of the sweater at this point. I mean, some people are still just getting their yarn, just working on the gauge swatches. There are people who have already finished their whole sweater, which totally like blows my mind. I'm kind of a slow knitter, so the fact that there are multiple people who have already finished this sweater is wild to me, but awesome. We did post a story on our Instagram this week asking what questions people had, what they would like to cover, and all the questions were about the sleeves. Like, even though there are people at all different stages, I think the most common stage for people right now is being somewhere in their sleeves. And it's the first step of the sweater. It's the first thing you do. So we're just going to focus in today on like each step from casting on to getting to the top of your sleeve. We're going to talk about different methods for knitting in the round, demonstrate how to get up sitting, we're going to demonstrate how to set up for knitting 2 at a time sleeves. That's a really popular question that we get. And we're going to demonstrate the cording stitch again, because we also got a lot of questions about that. It is a tricky step. It's one of the first things you do. So we know it's tricky. We're going to demonstrate it again.
Yes. And leading off of that, since we got so many questions about both the cording stitch and the magic 2 at a time magic loop, we got back to the team and we decided we may as well make some tutorials to like help you guys more with that. So really excited to announce that the one for the cording stitch is available, and the magic loop one is coming next week, 2 at a time.
Yes. So, we're going to put some links to that in the chat, but you can also, if you go to purlsoho.com and search for cording stitch, right now you can see we had a tutorial previously for the cording stitch. We added sort of an appendix showing how to use a lifeline to make the cording stitch much easier. And then the 2 sleeves at a time on magic loop tutorial, I believe, will be available next week, but we are going to demonstrate it today. Yeah. So, and then of course, at the end, after we get through talking about all the different steps of the sleeve, our favorite part, we're going to have first some Q&A. So, if you're not working on the sleeve, if you have a question we don't cover, go ahead and put those questions in the chat. Our moderator team will answer what they can. Anything that's, a little trickier that we want to spend a little more time on, we're going to try to get to those questions towards the end of the meeting. And then at the very end, we'll have an opportunity for you to share your progress if you wish. And again, just as a reminder, in case you're just joining us, we are recording this meeting. So if you don't wish to be in the recording, just go ahead and turn off your video. And you can also, don't raise your hand to share your work if you don't want to be in the recording. But with that, I think it's time to get into our agenda. So one of the questions that came in on Instagram that I thought was interesting was somebody said they'd never started a sweater with the sleeves first and wanted to know if it's hard. I don't know, I feel like that's kind of a tricky question. I don't think it's necessarily harder, but it is probably different. I think top-down sweaters these days are a lot more popular. So a lot of people are used to starting more like with the body, with the main part of the sweater. And this sweater, because it's bottom up, we chose to start with the sleeves. There's actually no difference between starting with the sleeves and starting with the body in terms of how it all comes together. I have seen some people choose to skip ahead to start with the body of the sweater instead, which is totally fine. But it's hard to say if it's more difficult. I think it's probably just different. Would you say the same, Jaja?
Yeah, I would say it just takes more time to see any progress. If anything, it's either you're stuck on second sleeve island or you're going to go all the way around in the body. But I wouldn't say one's more difficult than the other.
Yeah, both methods have pros and cons. So really it's not, I don't think it's anything to feel intimidated about, that it starts with the sleeves. Even if it's something different for you, it's not going to be trickier. And also you get some of the, not necessarily tricky, but some of the parts that you have to focus on, like you get, you start your increases right away. Whereas when we do the body, you get to just go you mostly are going to be knitting straight. So but you got to do both parts eventually. So I don't think it really matters which one to start with.
I know if you're intimidated by short rows, you might want to wait because the short rows start sooner on the body is another thing.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. But one of the things you do have to do when you start with the sleeves is you have to knit in the round with a small diameter of work. Our pattern calls for double pointed needles. I'm going to go ahead and switch to my second camera, and if my other co-hosts could take themselves off of spotlight so everybody can see my screen clearly. Okay, so double pointed needles, I feel like they kind of get a bad rap, but fortunately there are options. The pattern is written for double pointed needles, which I have here on a sample. My actual sleeves, which are a little harder to see because they've now gotten so big, I am doing magic loop. So this is we do have a magic loop tutorial on our website. And there's absolutely no reason not to substitute magic loop if you're more familiar with it. Jaja is using a third method. It's a type of needle called flexi flips. Jaja, do you want to add yourself to this spotlight for a second? And explain what flexi flips are and how they work.
Okay, let me switch the video. Yep. Sorry, what's going on? Okay. So flexi flips have 3 needles instead. We're only working with 2 at a time. Let's put this even higher. There we go. So you cast on, you're only working with 2 needles at a time. They look like this when there are no stitches on them, where there's a much shorter end and this flexible tip in the middle. And what happens is you can just continuously go in the round with this third needle as your working needle. So it's a little less cumbersome, but pretty similar to double pointed needles.
Yeah, it's an interesting hybrid between doing something like circular needles for a magic loop or doing double pointed needles. It's a pretty neat technique. They are kind of, you love them or you hate them. Jaja loves them.
I like them.
I am not a fan personally. So, but lots of people do love them. So, if you're, a little scared of double pointed needles because you've got all these tips hanging out and they're, sort of awkward to use, you might want to try flexi flips. They're a pretty neat invention and worth giving it a shot. Also, Another question we've had that's totally valid is, can you do it on just one circular needle? And the answer is, it depends. Some of the smaller sizes, so generally the smallest single circular needle is about a 9-inch needle. The smaller sizes of the sweater, the sleeve at the bottom is only about 7 inches around. So you're still going to have to use double pointed needles or magic loop or something to get started. But as you start increasing, you could certainly switch to a 9-inch needle or even to a 16-inch needle. Maybe when you're about halfway through the increases for most sizes, your sleeve should be large enough around to switch to a 16-inch needle. So even if, if you don't like the magic loop, you don't like the double points, you don't like the flexi flips, there is hope. You can get through just the beginning of the cuff. And as soon as your sleeve is big enough, switch to a 16-inch needle. All right. So, however, the question we get a lot is, how do you set up for 2 sleeves at a time in the round? So I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. I'm using 2 different colors of yarn just to make it easier to keep track of which sleeve is which. I know this color I chose for my first sleeve is a little dark, but don't worry, you don't actually have to see the stitches in this color. So this would be like sleeve A and sleeve B, and this is imagining that we're starting from the beginning of the sleeve. And my practice sleeve here is only 20 stitches long. Obviously the actual pattern, the sleeves are much longer, but for this practice sleeve, I just went with 20 stitches. So I started with my sleeve A and I cast on 10 stitches, which is half of the stitches for sleeve A. Then I switched to a second ball of yarn for sleeve B and cast on the full amount of stitches. So this is 20 stitches here. So cast on half of sleeve A, the full amount for sleeve B. Then you slide everything onto the cable of your circular needle and you find the halfway point of your sleeve B, which, since this is 20 stitches, I'm going to count over 10 stitches, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and grab my cable of my needle here and pull out a loop of the cable. So I now, if you're used to magic loop, you can probably kind of see this sleeve sort of looks like it's set up correctly for magic loop. However, we still have to cast on the rest of the sleeves here. So I'm going to turn around. So I've got my tails of yarn for doing the long tail cast on from sleeve A waiting here. And now that I've pulled out this loop of the needle for sleeve B and split it in half, my needle tip has come around to back where I finished casting on half the stitches for sleeve A. And I can just set up for a long tail cast on as I did before and continue casting on the other half of the stitches for sleeve A. And you just want to make sure you pull nice and tight when you cast on that first one so that you don't get a gap between your 2 needles. And I can finish casting on my other 10 stitches. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I did not obviously measure my tail. I'm almost out of tail, but 9 is close enough. So you would cast on the other half of your stitches that you need. And then, making sure not to twist anything, turn it around again. So when you actually join in the round, the first stitch you knit is going to be the first stitch that you cast on. So you make sure you've got your needle with the stitches that the second half of the sleeve A stitches that you just finished casting on in the back, the first half of the stitches for sleeve A in the front. You're going to pull these up onto your needle tip, pull out the back needle. And now, if you're used to doing magic loop, this is probably looking pretty familiar at this point. And you can go ahead and insert your needle here and start knitting with sleeve A, and that joins it into the round. So we will have, as I said, we're going to have a tutorial on our website early next week. I believe we've already done photography, so we'll have this up there soon showing how to set this up. And then essentially, once you're set up, it's kind of easy to tell here because I've got the 2 different colors. You'll knit half your stitches with your ball of yarn that's attached to sleeve A, and then knit half your stitches with your ball of yarn that's attached to sleeve B, and so on and so forth. So you're basically you're always going to have 2 balls of yarn attached to your work, one for sleeve A, one for sleeve B. And as long as you don't cross over and use, your ball of yarn for sleeve A when you switch to your stitches for sleeve B, you should be fine. And then you know, the real advantage is you can make sure both your sleeves turn out the same. As I mentioned, I'm doing that for my actual sleeves here, which are not done, but are getting close. And that way I know that all the increases that I've done on my sleeve A are exactly the same as my increases that I've done on sleeve B. And I know that they're the exact same number of rows. I've actually just finished all of my increases, so I now have to knit straight for about, well, for my size, about 4 inches. And ordinarily, if I was doing my sleeves separately, I like them to be exact, so I will count my rows to make sure they come out exactly the same. But if I'm doing my sleeves 2 at a time, you don't have to count your rows, and you can be really confident that your 2 sleeves are going to come out identical. All right. Okay. So our other big demonstration today is we're going to talk about the cording stitch again. This is the first step of the sweater. Here's my swatch where I have a little sample of the cording stitch. This is very similar to a knit hem. Like there are a lot of patterns where you actually knit in a hem. This is almost like a miniature hem, a teeny tiny miniature hem. So we're going to talk about 2 methods. We're first going to talk about doing without a lifeline, and then we're going to talk about doing it with a lifeline, which, as I mentioned, is something we're adding to our tutorial to help anybody who's struggling with it, because this step is pretty tricky. So the pattern has you knit 8 rows, and then you're going to look at the back of your work where you've got your purl bumps, and you're going to pick up the purl bump 4 rows away from your work, which is, if you look right under the stitch on the needle, there's this little purl bump right here. You're going to not count that one and count down 4. So it's like you're skipping over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, I'm going to skip the first one, because when you're doing it in the round, it's easier. When you're doing it flat, the first one's very difficult to see. So again, you're going to count down 4. So here's the one right under the needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then pick up the 5th one right here. So this is 4 rows away. We're skipping over 4 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pick up this 5th purl bump. Put it on your left-hand needle next to your stitch and knit those 2 stitches together. So again, I'm going to show you several more times. We're going to skip over 4 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pick up this 5th purl bump right here. Place it on your left-hand needle next to your upcoming stitch and knit it together with that stitch. And you can see the new cording stitch sort of emerging right here as that gets tucked up. We have heard from people, and of course we acknowledge this. I'm demonstrating this in a, worsted weight plain yarn. It is a little trickier when you're actually using linen quill. Linen quill is very fine. It has a little bit of a fuzz or halo to it, a little bit of texture, which makes it a little harder. It can be helpful to practice. Like if you just wanted to knit up a quick little swatch in some plain yarn, some scrap yarn that you have handy, and give it a practice, it will help you recognize the anatomy of those stitches. So when you're ready to actually do it in linen quill, it's a little easier. So 1, 2, 3, 4, pick up the 5th one, making sure to stay in that same column of purl bumps, place it on the needle and knit those together. 1, 2, 3, 4, pick up the 5th one, place it on the needle and knit those stitches together. As you get used to it, you may even find that you don't have to count down every time. You may be able to look at this is the purl bump that was picked up last time, and just pick up the next adjacent purl bump. If you get, really, really familiar with the anatomy of those stitches, with what those purl bumps look like, you may find that you don't have to count down every time and can just see where the next purl bump to the left is to put it on your needle and knit it with the next one. Okay, I've got one more and then I'm going to get to where I placed my lifeline. So if you're still struggling with this, which many people do, it's still not easy. I mean, I've done this a lot. I've demonstrated a lot. When I did my sleeves, I think it took me about an hour to do 1 row of cording stitch. So it's still not a super easy thing. It still can be a little challenging. So what a lot of people have found really helpful is placing a lifeline, which you can see back here. My next upcoming stitches, I have a lifeline placed in that row of purl bumps. To place that lifeline, you have 2 options. The easier one is, so for this sweater, you knit 8 rows and then pick up 4 rows back for the cording stitch. So if you would imagine that I had just knitted 4 of those 8 rows, you can place the lifeline before you knit the second set of 4 rows by just looking at each of these purl bumps directly under the needle and threading. I've got just some plain cotton scrap yarn here. Threading your lifeline through each purl bump in the back of your work. This is a little bit different technique. Most of the time when you hear the phrase lifeline, it means just threading your scrap yarn through the live stitches on the needle. For the cording stitch, however, you have to put it in the purl bumps. If you just put it straight through the stitches on the needle, when you go to pick them up later, it kind of like disappears into the middle of the knitting. It's much more visible from the right side than the wrong side. If you want your lifeline to be visible from the wrong side, you want to put it in each purl bump directly under the needle. You can do this as an afterthought lifeline, which is actually what I did for this main swatch, where I'm going to demonstrate how to then pick up those stitches, where again, I just counted down, I skipped over 4 rows, and then in each of those purl bumps, right in that fifth row, I used my needle and went up in each purl bump. Even if you've already knit those 8 rows, I think it's a little easier to place this afterthought lifeline, because then you're only doing one thing at a time. You're just looking for those purl bumps instead of trying to look for the purl bumps and knit them together with the live stitches on the needle. Sort of, separates those 2 steps out, so you can just focus on one thing at a time. So you're going to either, count back and place your afterthought lifeline, or preferably, if you're just getting started, you're going to knit 4 rows, place your lifeline in the purl bumps directly under the needle, and then knit 4 more rows. So you've knit the 8 rows in the pattern. Now, when you go to do the actual cording stitch, you can see right where that lifeline is threaded into a purl bump. So there's no counting back. I can just follow the lifeline into that purl bump, place it on the needle, and knit it together with the stitch. And same thing, if I look to the back, I can just follow the lifeline into the next purl bump without counting back. Right there, place it on my needle, and knit the stitch. Same thing, follow the lifeline into the next purl bump right here, place it on the needle, and knit the stitch. And then after you finish your cording stitch all the way across, the lifeline just pulls out nice and easy and is gone. So I hope that's helpful. And you can see our videos of how to place that lifeline on our tutorial right now. If that was too fast for you or anything, I apologize, but you can go on our website and review our video, or review our picture tutorial on how to place that lifeline and how to use it. Cool. Oh, it is not, somebody just asked about my ring. It is not a knitting tool. It's just a ring I like. But it's funny that I get asked that a lot because I knit, and people say that all the time. So I do actually get asked if it's a knitting tool a lot. Okay. All right. I'm going to switch back to my oh, well, first, I'm going to talk about the another question that we got on Instagram this week was, how do you keep track of your increases? So when you're doing your sleeve, back to the general anatomy of the sleeve, you cast on, you do the cording stitch, and then you start increasing, because of course, if you look at your arm is bigger around, at your bicep than it is at your wrist. So you do have to increase. So one point of confusion that we see a lot is how to read the actual increases. So the pattern says continuing in stockinette stitch, which in the round is just knitting. Repeat the increase round, and I'm going to talk about the smallest size just for reference. If you're knitting a different size, you'll have different numbers for yours. Repeat the increase round every 7th round 12 more times. What that means is that you will knit 6 rows without increasing and then work the increase round on the 7th round. Sometimes people are like, does that mean 7 rounds plain? Does it mean 6 rounds plain? It means on the 7th round. So there will be 6 rounds plain. On the 7th round, you'll increase. And then you start over again. You do 6 more rounds plain, and on the 7th round, you increase until you have the correct number of increases. Now in linen quill, it's a little hard to see. So that's where the question is, now how do you keep track of these increases to know when have you actually done 12 increases? How do you know that you've done 6 rounds? One way that's really common is to use stitch markers. And you would do this after each increase. You can kind of see this is an increase right here. This is one of my make one rights. And I'm just going to slip a stitch marker into that increase. And then if I was doing this as I was knitting, I would do my increase row, which is, knit 1, make 1 right. I forget whether it's right or left first. Make 1 right, knit to the last stitch of the round, make 1 left, knit 1. So you would do that increase round, and then immediately right under your needle in your active stitch, place this marker. And then you can easily count by looking at that marker when you've done your 6 rounds. My sweater is actually 5 based on my size. And then when you do your next increase, you would do the same thing. You would just place a stitch marker directly under the needle in the increase itself. So you end up with this nice sort of column of increases. It makes it easy both to see how many plain rows you've done since your last increase and how many total increases you've done. If you have to count to 12 increases, if you have to count to, I think my size was actually 22 more increases. So then instead of going back and having to look for these make ones, which are pretty subtle, pretty hard to see in your actual knitting, you just have to count these markers. So this is a really common way. I mean, not everybody does that. As you can see, I don't actually do that in my knitting. I personally just count because when I sit down and knit, I'll just count, I've done 5 rows. Now it's time for an increase row. Some people do this on paper. They will just, as they're writing, they'll have their printed out paper and they'll just do hash marks to keep track of their rows. This, however, is really takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. I feel like makes it really easy to just look at your knitting and get a visual idea of how many increases you've actually done so far. So, all right. Yeah, I see somebody saying they do it on paper. Yep, write down all the rows first. So, that is another option, which I have done for other people. So I'll just show you on this piece of paper. Let's say you're doing every 6th round 12 times. One kind of, easy and fun way to track that would be to write down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or it was 7th row every 12 times for the smallest size. And then along the top, you would do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on to 12 times. And then you could just do a mark every time you do your row and just know that this 7th time you're increasing. So you end up with this nice little grid and you can just go all the way across and keep track. So it's really, there are a variety of ways to keep track of your increases. And it just all depends what works best for your knitting mind, for your knitting style. There are counters on your phones, but yes, I have the same problem. Somebody just said that they use their phone counter and they keep forgetting to switch it. I have the same problem because then you got to unlock your phone every time you get to the end of your row. So that doesn't work for me, but it does work for a lot of people. So definitely, find what works for you. There are lots of options for how to keep track of your increases. But no matter how you keep track of your increases, the important thing is to make sure that you end up with the correct number of stitches for your size by the time you're done. So however you keep track, when you think you've done all of your increases, make sure you count how many stitches you actually have and compare it to the pattern. Because it's certainly, with all the ways there are to keep track of your increases, anybody can make a mistake. It's totally not a problem. But as long as you, finish your increases and then compensate if you need to, maybe do a decrease on your next row, add an extra increase in, whatever it takes to get to the correct number of stitches so that when you're doing the raglan decreases, everything works out properly. So, all right. Next, then after you do all these increases, the final step of the sleeve, which we do get questions about, is how to put your stitches on hold, which I'm going to be demonstrating here with just a little bit. So going back to the pattern again, let's see, let me pull up the pattern so I can read this for you. So after you do all your increases, it says next round, knit 5, place previous 10 stitches on a stitch holder. And again, we get some questions about this. What does that mean? And it's confusing because you've only knit 5 stitches of this row, but then you're supposed to put the previous 10 stitches on hold. So what that looks like is that you will be putting the 5 stitches that you just knitted, which would be 5 stitches at the beginning of the current row, plus 5 stitches from the end of the previous row on the same holder. When you have these underarm stitches correctly put on hold, the beginning of the round will be right in the middle of those held stitches. So I'm just going to demonstrate that for you so you can see what I mean. So this is clearly not an entire sleeve. I've just done a couple rows. But we can kind of keep track of where the beginning of the round is by looking at this tail of yarn from the cast off. So I'm going to knit 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to place the previous 10 stitches on hold. For me, it's easier to turn around to the wrong side. So I'm now working backwards. I'm going to put those 5 stitches I just knit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus 5 stitches from the end of the previous row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on hold. And they're just going to be hanging out on this piece of scrap yarn. So now when I turn around, ready to finish knitting that row, you can see here are my stitches on hold for my underarm. Here is the tail of yarn indicating the beginning of the round, which is exactly centered in those stitches. And then you're just going to finish knitting that round. Your yarn is still right here. Your yarn is right adjacent to this next upcoming stitch that's still on the needle. So I can just use this yarn right here to finish knitting my round. So, and this is a question we get, I'm sure, Jaja, you've seen this question before, not just about this sweater. Well, this is a really common way to put your stitches on hold when you're doing a bottom-up sweater, is that you knit a certain number of stitches and then put more stitches than that on hold. So we get this question a lot. It's not like, it's certainly not anything, if you've never done this before, this is nothing to be like upset that you don't know how to do it. It's totally fine. But that's what we mean, is when you put those previous 10 stitches or however many for your size on hold, you will be grabbing some from the end of the previous round.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention, just because we had a one-on-one project help on this recently, is some people aren't sure if they have to pull it really tightly when you have it on the first set that's put on scrap yarn, since the working yarn's attached to that still.
Yeah, you just kind of, as you saw, I just kind of started knitting. If you pull too tight,
yeah,
it will actually kind of be a problem, because this
that's
first
why
stitch
you don't want to do too
small.
tight.
Yeah, so you don't have to pull it too tight. Also, this is kind of ahead of where we are now. When you get to the point where you're putting your body and your sleeves together, you are almost definitely going to have holes in the armpits, and it does not mean you've done anything wrong. It's just very normal. Like after you do the Kitchener stitch, it's very normal, like right here at this corner of the underarm stitches, to have some holes still there. Not a problem. You just sort of darn them up when you're done, but don't panic if you're at the point where you're putting your sweater together and you've done your Kitchener stitch and you see holes in your armpits. Don't panic. It's normal. It happens to everybody. Okay, I'm going to turn off this video. So that is the whole sleeve. That is the sleeve from casting on, doing the cording stitch, doing the increases, putting your underarm stitches on hold, the entire sleeve. I am going to just very, very briefly talk about starting the body, because we've also been getting questions about starting the body. And this is so heartbreaking to me. I've seen 2 people on Instagram who did the body, did all their short rows, and then found a twist in the cast on and had to unravel and start all the way over. And I just, oh, it makes me sad because that's a lot of stitches to have to start over. It's such a bummer. My top tip for avoiding twisting that cast on is to knit 1 or 2 rows before you join it in the round. Or if you were doing 2 rows, it would be knit a row, purl a row, because it's stockinette stitch. But at least if you knit 1 row before joining it in the round, it gives your cast on a little bit of stability. If there is a twist around the needle, it's so much easier to see if you have knit 1 round already. And this does mean that there's a tiny gap when you actually join it in the round. There's a little bit more of a jog than normal, but it's not hard to close that up because you have a tail there you have to weave in anyways. So when you weave that tail in, you can just kind of snug those 2 corners together a little bit more than you normally would. But yeah, if you're concerned, if you're having trouble getting it joined without a twist in it, just knit 1 round before you join it in the round, or knit 1 row before you join it in the round, and it will be okay. It will not be a problem. It will hopefully keep you from twisting your cast on, because it's such a bummer. It's so sad. Yeah, and I think that's about where we're going to stop and start moving on to Q&As. Oh yeah, somebody just said, Deborah just said she knit 3 rows, which is also totally fine. Like even knitting, as long as you remember, if you want it stockinette, you have to knit a row, purl a row, because we're flat instead of just knitting as if we were in the round. Knitting 1, 2, or 3 rows, you can still close up that jog when you weave in your end, and it will make it even easier to avoid a twist. So, all right. So I think we're going to move on to the Q&A. Jaja, what questions do we have that people are wondering?
One that was asked early on, which is a little ahead, but since there can be holes in multiple places, I wanted to talk about. Catherine asked, any tips to close some holes on the sides of the body, in parentheses, at the end of the short rows?
Oh, at the end of the short rows. Sometimes when you're doing short rows, when you have that last short row where you're knitting all the way around, you do get a little bit of a hole. If you're picking up the wrap and turns correctly, there shouldn't be holes, except maybe at the very last one, like the last where you've purled and you turn and now you're knitting all the way around and you come back to your short row. Kind of feels like you're coming from the wrong direction. We do have that in our wrap and turn. Our short row wrap and turn tutorial has a special video showing how to handle that last wrap and turn when you come back around. You basically have to kind of pull it off and put it on you pull the wrap off and put it on the needle. Don't have a sample to show you, and I haven't done it super recently, so I don't know if I'm going to explain this quite right if I just sort of go off the cuff. But there is a little bit of a trick to it. If you check out our short row wrap and turn tutorial, it will show you how to do that. I see somebody just said they substituted German short rows, which is also a possibility if you haven't gotten to those short rows yet. Again, in our German, we have a separate tutorial for German short rows, which specifically covers how to substitute German short rows for a wrap and turn short row. There's a very minor change to the pattern. Essentially, you have to knit or purl 1 extra stitch before turning and creating the double stitch. But that's also a possibility if you already know you prefer German short rows. If you're a big fan of German short rows, check out that other tutorial as well to see how to make that substitution.
So thank you, Juliana. So a lot of people seem like they have questions about the short rows and German short rows, so kind of piggyback off of that. Someone asked, this is more of the feedback. They said, this is Mona. Why is the wrap and turn technique suggested in creating the short row when, after watching both tutorials, wrap and turn and the tutorial for creating German short rows, we suggest the knitter will no longer want to use the wrap and turn technique.
So, I mean, I feel like wrap and turns are probably the default short row. It's usually the first short row people learn. This is actually one of our classic Purl Soho patterns. I forget what year it came out, but this pattern has been around longer than that German short row tutorial, which says that you won't want to do wrap and turns anymore. That is more recent than this pattern. So that's, I mean,
2013 or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. So that's not, it's certainly, I think both methods of short rows are good to know. And you can choose to substitute the German short rows if you prefer them, but really it's just that this is an older pattern and we wrote it for wrap and turns. And sometimes we write patterns for wrap and turns because there's also certainly an element of personal preference. Some knitters actually do prefer wrap and turns over German short rows. So, and there are a very few situations where you cannot substitute German short rows. This is not one of them. You can totally substitute German short rows in this sweater, but there is a case, there are going to be times when you can't do that. So it is good to know both.
So thank you. I hope that answers the question. Going back to the cording stitch, Jenny asked, when you do 2 sleeves at a time, is it more confusing to do the cording?
Good question, Jenny. So I did my my sleeves 2 at a time. I did my cording row 2 at a time. It is, yes. Yeah. I mean, it kind of is, because especially when you're making that transition from sleeve A to sleeve B, and then coming back to sleeve A on the other side with the magic loop kind of stretching things out a little bit. Yes, it's a little trickier. It's possible, but it is trickier. Another option is if you don't want to start your sleeves right away 2 at a time, you can absolutely do your 2 cuffs separately. Cast on sleeve A, get through the cording stitch, maybe do like a couple more rows, just so you're right past the cording stitch, set it aside, start sleeve B, do your cording stitch, do the same 1 or 2 rows, and then you can combine them onto your one long circular needle. So you get the tricky step out of the way on 2 separate sleeves, and then can add in the additional challenge of doing your sleeves 2 at a time. So that's always an option.
All right. This is one that I don't think we can answer now, but just to let them know, we'll get to this in a future I almost said episode, you know. Please show how to join sleeves to the body. It is not clear which are the underarm stitches. So I was going to ask if a moderator could, we actually have a tutorial for that. If a moderator can pop that in the chat.
Yes, we will put a link to that tutorial in chat. So yes, we have a video that shows in general how to combine the sleeves and the body, which ones are the underarm stitch. So what I was demonstrating earlier, where I put the previous 10 stitches on hold, you want to have those on one piece of yarn as I showed, and then you knit 1 row and place the rest of the sleeve stitches on a separate piece of yarn, a separate stitch holder, so that you have a difference between the underarm stitches, which are the first set of stitches you put on hold, and then the rest of your stitches. And I definitely recommend checking out our tutorial in a later episode or a later Zoom and Knit. We will be demonstrating that when we feel like we're kind of trying to follow along with where we feel most knitters are at in their sweater. So we will demonstrate that later, but for now, check out our tutorial because it does show you exactly how to do that. Hopefully it will answer all your questions. If it doesn't, for those of you who may or may not know, we offer free one-on-one Zoom help that you can sign up for on our website at any time. So if we don't answer your question, if you still have a question, if you want some more, like if you really want to specifically show what's going on with your sweater, please feel free anytime to sign up for our one-on-one Zoom help.
Yeah, a moderator could put a link to that in the chat as well. That would be great.
Yes.
And you'd probably be meeting with one of us on this customer service team.
Yeah. Cool.
How much more time do we have?
We've got a couple more minutes. We've got some more time for Q&A. So, and then we'll get to sharing some work, see how everybody's sweaters are coming along.
Okay. Going to backtrack a little bit. Some people had some yarn questions again. Okay. One, I think we can go through these more quickly because it was from the last meeting. Was it recommended last Zoom to wash and dry the cattail silk by machine? Yes.
Yes, our
Yes.
official washing recommendations for cattail silk are to machine wash and dry. I will say somebody wrote in after that and they machine washed and dried their swatch of cattail silk and found that their row gauge no longer matched ours in the pattern. Their stitch gauge still matched, but their row gauge shrank quite a bit to where it was not really even all that close to the pattern anymore. So, but that's why you want to do it. I know I pulled out one of my old not this sweater, but a different tank top I had made in cattail silk that I've machine washed and dried several times. And my row gauge was actually not too far off from our pattern. So definitely measure before and after if you're going to try that, to make sure that both your stitch and row gauge are still going to match the pattern after washing it. But hopefully if it does, it's really like, it feels so nice after you do that. So that customer who had written in, what we decided to do was, in her case, she was going to not machine wash and dry her sweater. She was just going to lay it flat to dry, to avoid that issue, because before machine washing and drying it, her row gauge was fine. So definitely always measure your swatch before and after blocking, before and after machine wash and dry.
Oh, I do want to clarify, because I just saw Jenny Parker ask, are you saying to wash the cattail silk before beginning the sweater, not the swatch?
No, you don't want to wash your yarn before knitting your swatch. You want to knit your swatch and then machine wash and dry your swatch. Yes.
Get the most accurate results.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
And then another one. Someone just bought some Santalina and asking if Rachel, and would it be possible to use it for this sweater? I say absolutely. We've had a lot of people trying Santalina. It's turning out really nice.
Yes. And I mean, of course, you should always knit a gauge swatch. Everybody should always knit a gauge swatch. But if you're substituting yarn, it's even more important to knit your gauge swatch. Knit a nice big gauge swatch, measure carefully. But there are a lot of finger weight yarns that will work, including Santalina, which is one of my favorites. Again, and also Santalina's machine wash and dry as well. So if you think you're going to want to machine wash and dry your sweater, same thing, machine wash and dry your swatch and measure your gauge both before and after to make sure you won't get an unhappy surprise the first time you wash your sweater. But it should be fine. I also, somebody had written in who used our buttercup cotton, which is a really good, very economical option. And she was thrilled with how her sweater came out in buttercup cotton. Other options would be Posy. I think would be like a sort of a cozier version of the sweater. But yeah, there are a lot of options. Oh, somebody just wrote in the chat that they use sweetgrass and it's beautiful. I like that idea a lot.
Yeah.
I love sweetgrass. So yeah, so there are a lot of fingering weight yarns out there that you can use. Just make sure, knit your swatch. Knit your gauge swatch. Don't skip your gauge swatch.
Yes, and so I'm seeing questions again as well about curling at the edge. Multiple people asking that, Hazel and Heather, and if blocking will help. We answered this last time, but just to kind of reiterate, agree. Yeah, blocking does wonders for
blocking
the
will help. And a little bit of curling is normal, just because of how the edges of this sweater are, because it's stockinette stitch, and then you do that
the cording stitch.
Let me grab my actual sweater and see if I can hold it up and show you how it looks. So you can see that my edge right below my cording stitch is curling up, and that's normal because it's stockinette stitch. Stockinette stitch always curls up. When I block it, this will relax a little bit, but it will still always curl up a little bit. But it should just kind of stop at the edge of the cording stitch. And then above the cording stitch, you shouldn't have any more curl. It should just be nice and flat, even before blocking.
Has that already been blocked, Juliana?
No, this is my sleeves.
That's without blocking.
This is without blocking. So yeah, you can see that there's a little bit of curl. It'll relax a little bit, but then before blocking even, there's no curl in the actual sleeve. There is, if you have substituted another yarn, linen quill and cattail silk are both naturally very drapey. Cattail silk because it's a silk fiber, linen quill because it has a lot of alpaca in it. If you're substituting a totally different yarn, you may find that it curls up. Oh, somebody just said that their sweater body is curling up. And that actually doesn't surprise me because it's a wider piece of knitting than the sleeve. Because the sleeve is narrow, it sort of keeps itself a little bit flatter. But in the actual body, you may see that the whole thing is curling up above the cording stitch. I am very confident that blocking will get rid of that. Yeah, just definitely make sure you can even get a little bit of a preview now by gently steaming it. Don't touch it with your iron, but blast it with some steam and sort of use your hands to flatten it out. But wet blocking really is the key for making sure your edges relax and look nice and tidy and flat. So yeah, if you're using linen quill, if your body's curling up a little bit, don't be concerned. It'll look fine once you block it.
Sorry, I looked away just because I was I was getting confused between the chat and what we collected so far.
Yeah. Somebody just asked what was the best way to block, and somebody also asked, do you block every time you wash the item? These are both great questions. So I think the best way to block linen quill is to wet block it. And there are a lot of benefits to wet blocking besides the actual blocking part. I mean, you've spent however long it takes you to knit your sweater. Me, it's going to be months, where I'm knitting my sweater. Sometimes I'm snacking while I'm knitting my sweater. I'm dragging it around to like sit outside at the park, and it sits on a park bench sometimes. Your knitting gets kind of dirty, and there's also, oils from your hands, from your skin that get on your knitting, and that's not like anything wrong with it, but blocking, if you steam block, none of that's going to come out. So I think it's really beneficial to wet block your sweater, because it'll wash out all of that just kind of general like dirt and wear and tear that's accumulated while you were knitting it. And then also wet blocking for most yarns will give you better results in terms of making sure all your edges lay flat, your stitches come out nice and even. The second question was, do you have to block it every time? And for a sweater like this, yes and no, because every time you wash it, you are still going to be soaking it in a tub of water with a little bit of wool wash. You do still have to lay it flat to dry. But it does sort of hold its shape from the first time. I don't necessarily, the first time I block something, I might get out my tape measure and make sure the chest measurement's the same at the top and bottom, that the two sleeves are the exact same length. When I'm blocking it subsequent times, I usually don't do that, but you're still following a lot of the same steps in terms of, soaking it, laying it flat to dry, kind of patting it out and making sure it's sweater shaped and nice and flat, and not picking it up until it's totally dry. So it's similar to blocking when you wash it, when you're hand washing your garment later, but it may not be the same. Now, if we're talking about a different project, if we were talking about a lace shawl, for example, yes, you would have to block it every time pretty much, because lace just it really benefits from being stretched out. But this is a stockinette sweater, so I don't think it needs quite that level of care and attention every time you wash it.
Great questions. I think there are two that are kind of related that I wanted to talk about together.
Okay.
And T asked, is this pattern designed to be pretty loose? And June asked, can this be made without short rows? And I think Julianne is probably going to know why I'm putting those together.
Yeah. So, I mean, the short row one's easy. So there are two sets of short rows in this sweater. One is at the bottom of the sweater and creates the curved hems. Those can totally be left out. If you don't want curved hems on your sweater, if you prefer a straight across sweater, just skip them. Just cast on your sweater, do your cording stitch, and start knitting. Like, you can just go ahead to where it says how long your sweater should be up to the armpit. Just go ahead and skip to there. Just skip them. There is a second set of short rows, which are at the neck of the sweater. So after you have joined your sleeve and your body together, you do your raglan decreases. You then place the center neck on hold and do a series of short rows going across the back. Those ones, I would not recommend skipping. You cannot skip those ones because what that does is it makes it so the front neck of the sweater sits a little lower than the back, which is much more comfortable when you're wearing it. Otherwise, it can feel a little like choky. If you've ever done a sweater that doesn't have any short rows in the neck, they feel like they're kind of riding up in the front. So it just makes it so it you know, curves over human anatomy, which has, you know, you've got a little more space in the back of your neck and across the back of your shoulders. So it just gives you a more customized, comfortable fit. So don't skip that second set of short rows. And then the other question, were they talking about the fit being loose or the stitch, the gauge being loose? Because I thought I saw a question in chat about the gauge being loose. I wasn't sure if this was the same question.
I think that's a different question. I think this is more the overall fit.
Okay, the overall fit. This is customizable. So if you take a look at the last page of the pattern, each size of the sweater, you know, there's like size 38, size 40, size 44, I forget what the actual sizes are. That refers to the actual finished measurement of the sweater. And then below that, it says what body measurement we recommend, which would mean just, you know, measuring your chest at the largest point. And then it says, I believe, I have the pattern open so I can tell you, I believe we recommend 1 to 3 inches of positive ease. So what that means is we recommend 1 to 4 inches of positive ease. So we recommend picking a finished size, which will be 1 to 4 inches larger than your actual chest measurement. And by the way, we have a whole tutorial on this. I'm sure one of the moderators will put it in the chat if they have not already.
It's already there.
It's there. It's called Understanding Ease and choosing a size.
Selecting your size. Yeah.
And selecting your size. And so, you know, you have some choice. If you pick something if you pick a size that's about 1 inch larger than your actual chest measurement, you're going to get a little bit more of like I feel like that's like a comfortable t-shirt fit, right? Like it's, you know, it's not skin tight, it's not like a real tight fit, but it's, you know, it's also not oversized. Now, if you go more towards that 4 inches of positive ease, then you're going to get more of like a sweatshirt style fit, a little bit looser, a little bit more comfortable. So you have some flexibility to choose the size. And I mean, that's one of the beauties of knitting is you can choose a size and you can make it fit you the way you want. Another way to choose a size, if you're still not sure, you know, like I say, a t-shirt versus sweatshirt fit, that could mean something different for anybody who wears t-shirts or sweatshirts. You can always choose a sweater that you already own, not necessarily one that you knit, one that you bought in a store that you really like the fit of, lay it flat and measure the chest of that sweater. And then compare that to the finished measurements in the pattern to choose a size that's most similar so that you know you're going to be getting a size that fits like a sweater that you already like. But that's a good question. And that's kind of tricky. Like there's also, if you've never made a sweater before, you're going to do your best. But I know my first sweaters, even with all that information at hand, I still like, I learned, you know, I made one that had 4 inch positive ease and I went, you know, maybe this isn't the positive ease that I like. Maybe I prefer something a little tighter fitting. So definitely you know, measuring something you already have, I feel like is the most accurate way to know what it's going to feel like when you finish it and you're wearing it. Yeah, great question. All right. Okay, I think it is time to share some projects. So if you would like to share your work with everybody, show us how far you've come, just go ahead and raise your hand. Like it's a little function, you can click on the 3 little dots at the top of your picture in Zoom and raise your hand. And we'll be inviting you on to share what you've done so far.
Yes. And I know in particular, there was one, I don't know if she's here again, but there was somebody, Sandra, who had some technical troubles last time. I'm going to look through the different ones. If I do see you, we're just going to see if we can get that going.
Okay.
If not, we're just going to go ahead. Sorry, don't see Sandra, so I'm going to go ahead and spotlight some others that I see hands raised.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Carol. You're welcome. I'm glad you came. I'm glad this was helpful. We have so much fun presenting this and like seeing how everybody's going and making sure everybody has those successful sweaters. So I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Only 3 today? I noticed someone in the chat asked if anyone's finished and has one to show that's finished already.
Yeah, Hazel is wearing their sweater. I'm impressed.
Oh.
Oh, and I see some people saying they can't figure out how to raise their hand.
Oh, okay.
So if you have, maybe somebody else can tell them, because I don't have the option to raise my hand because I'm the host. So if somebody can see how to raise their hand. Okay. All right, we'll sort that out in the chat.
Yes, but we can start with
yes.
Looks like Mirabelle's up first. Oh, I think she has, I'm not sure if she can unmute herself.
I've got it.
Perfect.
I got it. I'm unmuted. I was telling them to look down. When you touch your picture, the 3 dots are at the bottom right, and you touch that, and then you can raise your hand. I was trying to like tell you guys it's at the bottom. It's not at the top anymore.
Oh, they must have switched.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
That's why they can't find it.
There's always something.
So, yeah, I was late to join tonight. I'm sorry. My father-in-law and mother-in-law are in town, so we were eating dinner, but I switched needles. I've made it very far. I'm very proud of myself.
Awesome.
It's one, but I went to wooden needles, and it's better. The ladders are not nearly as bad as they used to be.
Good.
I've been knitting for like 17 years, but I have a long way to go. So I may have been yelling at this earlier today, but I'm very happy. But there is, and I got to show you this. I dropped a stitch, so there's a hole.
Oh, that's okay.
It's staying there. It's staying there. It's my hole. I'm owning it.
But that's looking awesome. You have gotten more done than last time, so that's fantastic. Thanks for coming back again and sharing your progress. Yeah.
So,
awesome.
I'm gonna mute myself. Sorry.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Kate Kelly.
Hi. So this is my first time making a sweater. I got a sleeve and a quarter done.
Fantastic.
So it's actually for kid 2. That way, if it doesn't fit her, it'll fit kid 3.
That is all. I did that with my own kids. I would start with the oldest one, and if they grew faster than I knitted, and then you've got more. You just hand it down to the next one. Yeah. So that's awesome.
So
yeah,
she's been excited because it fits her arm. So she's like, "Can I wear it now?" I'm like, "No, you can't wear the arm out. You know, it's just an armhole."
That's good. I'm glad she's enthusiastic though. It's always nice to knit for somebody who appreciates it.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Kate. That's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Hazel, I see you're wearing your lightweight raglan pullover already.
Yeah, my daughter's name is Hazel, so I'm Amanda, but I couldn't figure out how to change it. Yeah, I was the one asking about the curling, so it's kind of more of a crop. I did add an extra inch to it, but hopefully the wet blocking will work. So.
It will. It really will help a lot, especially because linen quill has so much alpaca in it. It really like drapes and relaxes beautifully when you block it. So I think it'll be much better, but that's awesome. So it took if you started on cast on day, that's about a month and 10 days, right?
Yeah, I may have started a little later. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, and I did have to frog it once because my gauge was totally off. So yeah, so I went down a size and I went down 2 needle sizes, but and then it was my first bottom up. So I struggled with how to modify. I always like to have a longer yoke. So I was trying to figure out, how to add backwards sort of. So that was a challenge, but.
Right. Well, it turned out fantastic and it looks cozy and nice. And you're just in time for spring when you can wear a lightweight sweater. So awesome. Well done. Good job.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. All right. Gail.
Hi. Well, I've finished both sleeves now.
Fantastic.
Second sleeve. I didn't do them at the same time. Wish I had realized I could have done that because I'm trying to make sure I get them to the same size. I have noticed that one sleeve is slightly narrower than the other. but it's probably less than 1/4 of an inch. And I'm like, I'm going to live with it because to have to pull it all out. I think if I were, I'm using the cattail silk. And I think if I were to do this sweater again with the silk, I would probably do it, the sleeves flat until after the cording, because I found the cording very, very difficult to do. In fact, it doesn't look very even, but again, it's a handmade sweater, so I'm going to live with that.
And all of that, I mean, even like the sleeves being slightly different, when you block it, you can adjust for that. So how I was saying earlier, the first time I block a sweater, I get my tape measure out and I go around with my tape measure, make sure everything's the same. You can do that with your sleeves. Like while it's really nice and wet, measure the width of each sleeve, and the one that's a little narrower, just give it a little tug. And it should then, as long as you let it dry completely before you pick it up, it should hold its shape pretty well, and they should feel the same when you're wearing them. So, and that cording stitch and everything will get much more even when it's blocked.
And I did the swatch before, and I had to go down a needle size, but I did not wash and dry my swatch. So I have a feeling I may machine wash it, but I'm not going to probably machine dry it.
That's, yeah, I mean, it would be best, like if you still have your swatch. I know I keep my swatches around unless I really need the yarn. I don't unravel my swatches. If you still have it, you could always wash it now just to make sure you're not going to get super surprised. But the general, most people's experience with cattail silk is that and I know for mine, like my stitch gauge stayed the same. My row gauge got a tiny bit tighter. The knitter who had written in, her row gauge got a lot tighter. But if you're not putting it in the dryer, you're right, it probably will be fine. You can just lay it flat to dry and make sure you've got it all nice and the right size before you let it dry, and it should be fine. So awesome. Thanks. All right, thanks, Gail. All right, Donna, hi.
Hi, yes, I'm the one that wrote in and had this latch problem.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, hi.
No, that you meant, but I've got one sleeve done, and I'm just started the second one. Fantastic. And so I'm stage. So yes, I will not be putting this in the dryer at all.
Yes.
I don't know what happened, because that would have had me change sizes to two different sizes, I think, with how much that. Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard to say. My cattail silk that I had that experience with, I bought 4 or 5 years ago. So it's a totally different dye lot. So that could certainly be why mine shrank less than yours did in the dryer. But that's the nice thing about doing that swatch and testing it out, is now you know not to put it in the dryer, and your sweater will always fit.
Exactly. And then the hint on the Lifeline and the cording stitch is great, especially when I get to the body, because it does take a long time to do that stitch.
It does.
On cattail silk, there's no give, so I had to flip the work back and forth to make that work on the sleeves.
Yeah.
So the Lifeline should help a lot.
Yeah, the cattail silk is a little harder to knit with. I had another person write in this week who was saying like the cattail silk is so much harder to knit with than the linen quill, and we know like it is. It doesn't have any stretch. The results are beautiful in the end.
Right. Yeah. The swatch came out really nice. And I use, as you can see, I use 2 circulars.
Mm-hmm.
Double
that's another method I didn't even think to mention. It's similar to Magic Loop, but you have each half on a separate circular needle.
Yes. And it's, because double points and me don't get along. There's too many ladders. I avoid them this way.
Good. All right. Well, I'm glad you have a solution that's working for you, and you know how to take care of your sweater when it's done.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for the help.
Awesome. Thank you, Donna. All right. Jenny, hi.
Hi, everybody. Gosh, there's so many amazing ideas. And that last idea of using 2 round needles is awesome. Very excited to do that. I'm using the cattail silk, and look at this. This is green, dark green.
Wow.
I've never knit with anything this small. I'm not an experienced knitter. So working with a really dark color, I have to say, has been a real challenge.
It is. Yeah. Even for experienced knitters, I have met many experienced knitters who won't knit in black yarn. Like it's not just you. There are people who are great knitters who won't use black yarn because it's so hard to see. So good job. You can do it. Sit under a bright window.
So, I think that, I have part of the sleeve done. I'm not happy with the cording. I'm still considering taking it out, especially since I didn't wash my swatch. So I'm going to wash the swatch now and see how that goes. But I did also want to thank you because I've put this project a little bit on hold while I make a gift for someone. And the Osmosis Wrap is so pretty and such a pleasure to work on.
Oh, lovely. I know we love that project. Thank you for showing it. It's such a nice one. If anybody's not familiar with the Osmosis Wrap, it's it uses our Sweetgrass Fine, which comes in 5 or 6 undyed colors, and then you hold a strand of tussock with it. Six undyed colors. So you start with the lightest color with a strand of tussock, and then you switch to the next darker and the next darker. So you get this lovely fade of values, but all with the same color of tussock held with it. So
yeah, these are the first 3.
Very pretty.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Really beautiful, beautiful.
Awesome.
So
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Thank you for all these fantastic tips.
Oh, I'm glad we could help. Yeah. And I mean, if you do decide that the cording stitch is not for you, we've seen a couple versions where people are doing ribbing on the edge of their sleeves. I saw somebody said in the chat a couple minutes ago that they put garter stitch on the edge of their sleeves in their sweater. As long as you put something, seed stitch would probably be another option. Anything that won't roll, you can totally modify your sweater to make it yours, to make it what you like. So that's definitely an option. But if you try the cording stitch again, that Lifeline will help keep it nice and even, especially in that dark color. It'll make it a lot easier to see the stitches.
Absolutely looking forward to that.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Jenny. Okay. Jera, I hope I'm saying your name right.
You are.
Okay, good. Hi.
Yeah. Hi, I'm a new knitter. I've only been knitting about a year. And so this is a lot of great information. I really appreciate it. I'm here.
Oh, very nice sleeve. I like it.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I'm doing it all right, but I actually really enjoyed the cuff, and I think that I got it right. I mean, it took a really long time, but I really enjoyed it. I just appreciate all the information that you guys have, since I'm so new at this and very slow. I did actually use, I used my round needles for the whole thing.
Oh, nice. So you're still on your short needles for the top of the sleeve.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems to be working okay for me. I'm almost done with the sleeve.
Awesome. That it's whatever works for you. And like somebody at the last session had asked how long of a needle to use for 2 at a time, because it also kind of depends on what size you're doing. So like I'm doing the size 44, I think, and I have a 40-inch needle, and it's full. Like for my 2 sleeves at a time, it's pretty full. Somebody doing a larger size might have to use even a 47-inch needle. But then some of the smaller sizes, you could probably get away with a 32-inch needle. But if you're comfortable with them all squished onto the small needle, that's a great option, because then you don't have to worry about ladders from double points. You don't have to worry about learning how to do magic loop. And I think that's great that you're a new knitter. Like this is a really approachable pattern, I feel like, for first-time sweater knitters, for beginner knitters. So I'm glad you're enjoying it, and that your sleeve looks great. I think it looks fantastic, and hopefully you love your sweater.
Yeah, so far lots of fun. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm glad. Thank you, Jera. All right. Olga, hi. We've seen each other on Instagram many times.
Hi, nice to finally meet you.
Yes.
Who I was talking to on Instagram. Hi, everyone.
So Olga's wearing her sweater, which you may have seen. I know we posted it a couple times on Instagram when it was in progress using the turmeric yellow. It looks lovely.
Yeah, I wanted to show that. Okay, I didn't iron it, so, but it is not. Mine is not curling, so I made it with linen quill, and I don't have any curlings. So,
I know you wet blocked yours because you had that lovely video showing how to wet block it. So it really does make a difference.
Yes, and I'm working on my second one. So
awesome.
I have 2 sleeves already. I'm finishing the second sleeve, and I'm doing it with the magic loop.
Fantastic. Awesome. Yes, that's fantastic. I'm so glad you're making another one. I don't know if I have to, I am a slow knitter. Again, I am amazed. Olga finished her first one in 2 weeks. Is that right?
10 days, yes.
10 days. I can't even like.
I had to unmute for that. Oh my gosh.
It only takes 2 days to make a sleeve for me, and then it just goes from there. I really enjoy this pattern. So yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Awesome. Yes, Olga is definitely a knitting rock star. Like everybody who can knit that fast always is like, I'm such a slow knitter, so I'm always so impressed. So, but also anybody who's out there who's a slow knitter, like I'm there with you. I'm already worried that I'm not going to finish in time for my own knit along. So don't. But that's awesome. I'm so glad you're wearing it. It looks great on you. You did an awesome job knitting it. I can't wait to see the next one.
I've been wearing it so often. It's really, really great. And I was worried that it's going to be a little itchy, but it is not the softest, definitely, but I do enjoy it. It's it's linen. Like
yes.
What do you? Yes. So
yes. And I will say, I have another sweater out of linen quill that I made several years ago, and it gets softer and softer each time you wear it, each time you wash it, just like, like a linen blazer or something, or a linen pants, they get softer each time you wash them, each time you wear them. It's the same with the linen quill. So anybody, sometimes we have people like write in, they get their skeins, they're like, oh, it's not as soft as I expected. Don't worry, it gets softer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, so nice to meet you and see you after chatting so much on Instagram.
Well, thank you so much for letting me talk, because I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand, but then my 7-year-old helped to help me. So
it's good we have these kids sometimes to show us how to do these things.
Yes. Thank you. Online schooling, yes.
Awesome.
Well,
thank you so much, Olga. All right. Catherine. Hi, Catherine.
Hello. So I am a slow knitter too.
Oh, good.
I am a new knitter. I started 2 years ago knitting only with the quarantine. And, but I'm following the pattern to the word, and I'm pretty happy. So I'm using linen quill in pink rhubarb.
Oh, I have a sweater in linen quill worsted in pink rhubarb. It is a lovely, bright.
I love the color.
Yeah, it's very.
So I don't know. You may not see it very well here, but it's a reddish pink.
Yes.
I have done the sleeves on 2 double-pointed needles. They are pretty the same size. That's okay. And I do them with 4, however. I prefer 4 to 3. I think it works better for me. And I have a tip. If someone was speaking about ladders, I don't have ladders. I have some irregularities with the linen quill. I think it's not always very regular, but I avoid ladders by changing. I do not need the same number of stitches each time. I change.
So you like go past the end of the double.
I pass a couple of stitches each time. So this way I don't have a ladder.
That's a great tip. That is a great way to avoid the ladders. So that's if anybody's not clear on that, that just means each time you get to the end of your double pointed needle, let's say you have 15 stitches on each double pointed needle, which is obviously not the right amount for your sweater, but let's say you have 15 stitches on each needle. When you get to the end of that first double pointed needle, you would knit 1 or 2 from the next double pointed needle. So now you have 17, but then you do the same thing on each subsequent double pointed needle. So your double pointed needles kind of rotate through the sleeve, and your ladders, then you don't get ladders because your join between your double pointed needles is not staying at the same spot in your knitting throughout. So any irregularities get more spread throughout, so they don't look irregular, they look regular. And you are right, Catherine, that linen quill does have some just inherent texture. Also the fact that it's a 2-ply yarn, it's not a super smooth yarn, so your knitting's always going to have some texture to it.
Will that help the blocking? Will the blocking help?
It will. It's always there. It's not going to go away entirely because it is just kind of the nature of the yarn. It has, those little bits of linen and stuff, but it will definitely get more even. Linen, I feel like it sort of puffs up a little bit when it's blocked. and evens out a little bit, but it still will have some texture. It will still have some irregularities. So don't feel like you're doing something wrong or like it's you that's knitting. A lot of what you're seeing is the yarn itself.
Okay, good. So I started the body, but I have the same problem as someone else, is that it's curling at the short row levels, the level of the short rows. But and I am the one with the holes on the side too.
Oh, the holes on the side at the end of the short rows.
I don't know. I think, but it's very. I don't know. It's little. Well, you can see it, but it's not much. It's.
Oh,
I hope I can fix that when I don't know if you can see it.
I can see the tiny little holes there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I hope I can fix it after.
I think blocking will help. I always, but anytime I have holes like that or in my knitting, I don't fix them until I've blocked it, because blocking really evens out a lot of irregularities. And if the yarn blooms slightly, you may find that you don't even see the hole enough to bother you. So definitely try blocking.
And I may not even see it when I wear it.
And you may not even see it when you wear it. You may not have to do anything at all. Yeah.
But I choose linen quill because I want it to be done by the end of the challenge in September. So I say, okay, that will be ready for Christmas time.
Yes.
But no, I am not as fast as Olga, but I am happy that it's getting there. And starting with the sleeves, I think we see the progress faster.
It is, especially if you do one at a time, because it starts with that smaller circumference. So you've got that like instant gratification of doing the sleeve and like, oh, look, it's growing, it's getting bigger. So there is definitely like a lot more sort of instant rewards when you start with the sleeve to keep you knitting. But yeah, that's awesome. It's looking great.
Thank you. And the instructions, they are very well written as usual. So
good. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Awesome. I'm glad.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Catherine. All right. I don't see anybody else waiting to share. If you are waiting to share, please feel free to jump in. However, I think we are getting close to the end of our time for today. Thank you all so much for coming to our Zoom. It's really, really appreciate you coming, really appreciate you knitting with us. We've been having so much fun just seeing everybody's work, people who are emailing in, chatting with you, people on Instagram. It's fantastic. For me personally, like I'm getting so much inspiration to keep knitting. Like I am usually not a one project knitter. I'm usually like a multi-project knitter, but I'm like, I got to keep up with everybody. Seeing all your sweaters is really inspiring me and giving me a lot of motivation. So thank you. And I'm so happy with everybody's progress.
And I just wanted to say, we've been getting so much wonderful feedback and emails, just WordPress everywhere. Because I think Juliana mentioned before, she's the one that mans the Knit-Along email. It's knit-along@purlsoho.com. And she's been seeing your questions there. And I watched the customer service at purlsoho.com one. And it's because of the questions that we got, where we got together with the team and said, can we do something more for the cording stitch and the 2 at a time? And they said, sure, why not? It's just it just shows how helpful it is. We want to hear what you guys need the most help with, what else you want to see, just so we can make this better. And I just wanted to talk about the Zooms, because I saw a couple people asking about the last one that was recorded. I don't think we addressed that. So we weren't able to record that the first one for legal reasons. We will be able to record this one and the future ones going forward. So I'm sorry, we won't be able to share that, but if anyone has questions about what we covered then, we're happy to answer them.
Yeah, and we'll let you all know when this recording is available. It's not going to be available tonight. So you can't rewatch it tonight. I'm sorry. But hopefully sometime next week, we'll have this session up on YouTube, so you can go back and watch it again. You can share it with your friends who maybe couldn't make it. I know there are certainly people who live in other time zones where this was not convenient for them. We will be having a Zoom meeting every month throughout the Knit-Along. So keep an eye out. The email inviting you to the next one should be in the next 2 weeks or so. We'll be sending that out as long as you're signed up for our Knit-Along emails. Yeah, and if there's something you want to see in these Zoom meetings, I know this week I put it up on Instagram asking people to ask questions. You can also email us if there's something you really want to see demonstrated in a Zoom in an upcoming Zoom and Knit. Just let us know. We would be happy to do that.
Oh, this is a fun question. How many people are signed up for the Knit-Along? Oh,
you're not gonna believe this number. It's crazy. It's over 10,000 people have signed up for our Knit-Along. Which is wild. Like I am every time I see that number, I'm just like, are you serious? Are these many people really gonna knit our sweater? Like, wow. So I mean, I don't know how many of those 10,000 people are going to knit. Obviously there aren't 10,000 people here today, but that is also like how exciting that many people are so excited about this sweater. So it really makes me happy. It blows my mind, but makes me really happy every time I see that number.
Exactly, same. It was so it's been a wild ride. This is our first one and we're so excited. I know the first time we saw different places where people were tuning in from, and we didn't do that today. We kind of went straight into it, but it's just also exciting to see just where all over people are tuning in from, and we love seeing it. We love seeing it on Instagram, on the website, just emails, wherever we can. It's a fun time.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the response we've seen, the enthusiasm is incredible. So thank you all. If you can, I mean, you can send us your images. You can use our hashtags on Instagram, hashtag Purl Soho KAL, hashtag Purl Soho Lightweight Raglan Pullover. We also have a gallery on our Knit-Along landing page on purlsoho.com where you can submit images and you can scroll through and see images that have already been submitted. But I mean, really, all of this is thanks to everyone who is knitting with us. So thank you. Stay in touch, tag us, and we hope we'll see you all at our next Zoom and Knit.
Yes, and just once again, if anybody has any questions they still have before the next Knit-Along, you can email us at customerservice@purlsoho.com or knit-along@purlsoho.com.
Yes. Yeah, anytime you have questions, reach out. We want to make sure you have a beautiful, successful sweater. So we're here to help. All right.
Thanks for tuning in.
Okay, thank you all. We'll see you next month.